I'd love for you to just explain to our listeners, what is it that you do? How are you helping people?
People have what we call the itty bitty shitty committee. They're the group of people that sit on your shoulder and tell you why you can't have what you want.
Is there anything else important for us to know about the psychology side right now?
There's always going to be different climates. There's going to be different scenarios. And it is actually a learned skill.
With that being true, what's one question you've asked that's had the biggest positive impact on your life or the life of the clients that you serve?
If just one question could immediately transform the quality of your life or the results of your business, would you want to know what that question was? Life and business strategist Kevin Bees interviews success masters to discover their life-changing questions. Welcome to the Life-Changing Questions Podcast.
Welcome back to episode number 248 of the Life-Changing Questions Podcast. Today we have Chandell Labbozzetta. She is the author of the book Confident Closing: Sales Secrets That Grow a Business by 400% in 6 months. She's a master trainer of neurolinguistic programming, a sales strategist, and a confidence maker. She has dedicated her life to inspiring, energizing, motivating, and training high performers to achieve new levels of success by working on the root causes of anxiety and underperformance. Confidence matters because success comes from the inside. Chandell's purpose is to inspire confidence in others so that they can make empowered decisions. And she loves her coffee and says that coffee is my blood type. So Chandell, welcome to the episode today.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. And yes, coffee is my blood type. I often make jokes and say, you don't want to meet me until I've had my first coffee of the day.
And I can tell you've had your first coffee of the day. You're raring to go. Now, we first met, it would be close to a decade ago, maybe a little bit longer than a decade ago now. And I know even back then you were a leading expert with helping people, with their sales, with their leadership, with NLP. So I'd love for you to just explain to our listeners, what is it that you do? How are you helping people with things in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I remember when we first met, it was wonderful all those years ago. And I think one of the interesting things that we see with human behavior, regardless of what people are actually doing in their careers or their life or their relationship, there's always an element of needing to be able to get traction. And I think what can very much happen is that people have what we call the itty bitty shitty committee. They're the group of people that sit on your shoulder and tell you why you can't have what you want. We help them to fire that. And we're a big believer in the fact that any success, particularly in sales, follows the strategy of 20% strategy, 80% psychology. And so we help people bridge that gap. And the analogy that I use to sort of explain that is that, let's say, for example, that you're a salesperson or you're wanting to coach a sales team to get great results. I could give you the best cold calling script in the world, proven to get results, which is the 20% strategy or the tactic. But then if we gave it to a group of people that had no confidence to pick up the phone, the 80% psychology, it wouldn't be worth the paper that it's written on. And so I think there's definitely a number of things that we do to help people to get the best performance out of their team members, out of themselves, to achieve the goals that they're looking to achieve.
So important. And this psychology piece really taps into the heart of, the show and what we're thinking about. We want to understand, people's psychology and mindset. I wonder if you can maybe help us understand someone who has tapped into a good psychology and is able to move forwards with sales and selling and having conversations, and someone who is maybe stalled because they haven't got the psychology piece right.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to assess this. And we see people, for starters, I think that confidence in itself is something that a lot of people assume that you either have or you don't. And it is actually a learned skill. And it has a lot to do with the focus, knowing your outcome, knowing what it is that you actually want to achieve, and then working out what are the steps or the little strategies or habits that you need to do to embody that, to communicate that, and to set on a pathway for that. So often when we see people, whether it be in a leadership environment or a selling environment or just even in high performance individuals, the difference between somebody who has the psychology piece versus someone who doesn't is that ability that regardless, whatever the environment produces, they can respond to that. And one of these little sayings that, platitude, if you like, that I respect gratefully, is this concept that I can't control the wind, but I can adjust my sails. And so we know from being in business for as long as we have been that there's always going to be different climates. There's going to be different scenarios. There's going to be changes in the way in which staffing happens within organizations. There's going to be differences in talent and how talent presents. There's going to be different economies that we have to produce results in. And regardless of what's happening in the environment or what the situation presents, I suppose someone who has the psychology piece knows that they have within themselves whatever they need in order to be able to respond to what's going on in that environment. And we see it all the time, particularly in today's climate, that there are a number of individuals that perhaps maybe haven't mastered that psychology element yet. And so they'll do well in good times. And then, if we get into a bleeding economy, or if there are obstacles or challenges with talent or team, they'll often sort of fall in a heap and go, well, it's not my fault. And so we spend a lot of time helping people to understand accountability, ownership, responsiveness when it comes to themselves and how they respond to the marketplace.
I love that. And that's so neatly summarized by that bumper sticker of I can't control the wind, but I can adjust my sails. If there is someone listening who is finding it hard to pick up the phone and make the calls, or feeling nervous because they know they've got a big sales appointment coming along, are there any immediate tips that you can give us to take control of how we feel and what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned earlier, I am in fact a master trainer of neurolinguistic programming. And for any of the listeners that are not sure what NLP is, a very quick summary for a complex subject is that it's how we use the language of our mind in order to affect our results. And so what many people may not know is my early career was actually as a professional business development executive. I managed sales teams. I also worked on many different deals, from everything from a transactional sales position right through to multi-million-dollar deals that took 18 months to actually close the deal. And one of the things that I adopted, that I teach to our students and the people that we work with, is the importance of being able to focus on what you want. You see, many of us have a worry wall. So whether we need to make a phone call or we've got a big deal, just like you talked about, many of us build up a worry wall between now and the thing that we're actually looking to achieve or to do. And we call that the event in the future. And so most people will focus on how they're going to mess it up, what they're going to feel if they say the wrong thing, what's going to happen if they don't get the deal. And so I simply suggest, and this is more than positive thinking, and I'll explain why in just a second, but I simply suggest that they actually determine first and foremost, ask the question to yourself, how do I want this to go? Like if it turned out exactly how I wanted it to go, what would I want to happen? So you're actually putting your subconscious mind's focus onto the outcome that you wish to produce. And then secondly, what would I see, hear, and feel to know that it turned out the way that I wanted it to? And so there your subconscious mind starts to create a picture in your mind and a scenario of as if it's it actually happening right now. And if I imagine that for a few seconds, not only am I doing a massive pattern interrupt to all of the chaos thinking that might be the doom and gloom of what could go wrong, but I'm also giving suggestions to my subconscious programming about what I need to look for as I look at my environment and the scenario. And so for a lot of people, when I first explain this technique to them, they will often say, oh, but that's just positive thinking. But the reality is that your subconscious programming, we call it unconscious because most people are unconscious of their subconscious, but your subconscious programming is actually not always clear about whether you're just imagining something very vividly or whether it's actually happening. So a lot of people create self-fulfilling prophecies by worrying about the future or the things that haven't happened yet.
So true. And who was it who said that? Maxwell Maltz, I think. Your brain can't tell the difference between something that's real or something that's vividly imagined. And a lot of us, whether it's sales calls or something else, we can spend a lot of time going into our head. You called it a worry wall. I hadn't heard it called that before. I like that. We have this worry wall and, it's between us and the event. And we spend our energy focusing on what's going to go wrong or what would happen if it went bad or if we didn't get the deal and the sale. And so just taking that moment then, and I love what you said is two things here. One, if you can actually picture it going the way that you want it, you interrupt that pattern, which is a great start already. And two, of course, your brain is going to get aligned to that. And you said he's going to look towards that or look for evidence of that. And so it's more likely you make it that way. Now, the key thing is that's not something that needs to take hours. That sounds like something that you can do in seconds, taking that time to see. And the important thing, I want to just pull out the important piece here, because you didn't just say get a vision. You kind of included, all of your sensors, what am I going to feel? What am I going to see? What am I going to hear if this happened now? And I think that's so, so critical. Okay. So we can step into anything then. If we have a worry wall, we step through it. The other thing that you mentioned as well, right at the beginning, was this itty bitty shitty committee, which I guess is the the voice, your voice, someone else's voice in your head telling you this isn't going to work, you suck, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
The visualization may help with that, but maybe you have some additional tips or techniques you want to explain how we can silence it, shitty bitty committee, or get them aligned to what we want.
Yeah, I think it's really important to mention that, our business is called Life Puzzle, but we actually say that sales is the number one life skill and that everybody's in sales. And there are three important sales that we make. The first is the sale you make to yourself about the evidence that you can achieve the things that you want. The second is influential. So how well do I communicate that message to other people so that it's compelling, even if I'm not selling a product or a service? And then the third is the transactional sale that many people are familiar with. And so when we talk about the itty bitty shitty committee, the first sale that you make to yourself is about the evidence that you have that you can, and whether or not you are doing the activities that lead you to convincing yourself that you have those capabilities. And so I think when it comes to, little habits and different things that we do, the worry wall and jumping over the worry wall in terms of knowing what it is that you would like to achieve, how you would like to see it unfold, what you would see, hear, and feel in order to make that happen is the first step, because you identify it. And as you rightly said, you're sort of creating not only a pattern interrupt, but you're looking for that evidence to support the outcome that you really want. The second part of that is the actions that we take. And so one of the things that we talk about extensively is that there are three requisites to move to any lasting change. And you had said about the itty bitty shitty committee that maybe it's your own voice internally, or it could be other people's voices. And the reality is it could be either of those things, or it may be past experiences where you had a go at something, but you kind of messed it up in some way. And so you created a belief that says, well, I'm no good at that. I can't possibly do that, but maybe you still have to do it. So the question becomes, if I've identified the focus on what I would like to achieve instead, then what are some small actions or small habits that I can install on what I'm doing that's actually going to get me more internal confidence, better feelings around the fact that I've got momentum towards those things that I really want to achieve? And the only reason that the itty bitty shitty committee is there is mostly because you either had a dialogue with yourself about what you could or couldn't do, or maybe someone suggested to you that perhaps maybe you weren't so good at that particular thing. And most people just accept those suggestions, whether they're made by themselves or by someone in their environment, or, it could be a well-meaning family member or a friend who's trying to help you protect yourself from disappointment. So the question becomes, what would I like the internal dialogue to say instead? And what evidence or what little habits could I produce that would enable me to change that dialogue?
I love it. Changing that dialogue is so, so important. I think there's two things here. One, we can have that dialogue about things we're going to do. We may be afraid of that sales call, that presentation, or whatever it is. Sometimes people get that dialogue very strongly after the event. Maybe they've done an amazing job. I recognize with entrepreneurs, we can be a very critical bunch of the things that we didn't do or the things that didn't quite go right. So now, is it the same technique to change that if we're being critical, this committee's inner voice about something looking backwards?
I think that's a really good point. And I see it too with high performers. And in fact, I can, share personally that the thing that actually got me into this field was actually that same experience where no matter how well I performed, I was always looking at the 2% that I thought I should have done, or I could have added this. And so my itty bitty shitty committee was all around what was missed as opposed to what was achieved. And so I can share personally that my strategy around that is that I look for something to celebrate as a result of what I've actually achieved. I'm sure you've seen it too, that there are some people that are afraid of failing. And then there are some people that actually have modes where they're afraid of succeeding because of the attention that it gets, or changes in their life, or all of these different things. So this may or may not be a strategy for everybody listening on the call, but I find that across the board, when I'm working with high performers that perhaps do the beating of themselves after the event, is to look for one small thing that they can celebrate. It's okay to do continuous and never-ending improvement by asking, what could I do better, or get feedback, etc. I think it's really important in terms of your own relationship with yourself and the internal confidence that you have, that you always look for at least one thing that you can celebrate and do an atta girl or atta boy at it, and just say, yep, that's definitely something that I can say I did really well and I feel great about it.
I love that. And so again, the important piece is shifting your focus, but this time you're shifting your focus away rather than the conversation about what didn't go well, wasn't, the way you wanted it to be. but focus on the wins. And there are always wins. One of the things I often share with my clients is I've got this like book here. It comes
Nice.
everywhere with me, and every day I make sure I write down my wins, even in the worst days when it's been terrible. There's always something to note as a win or a celebration. And it's very easy to fall out of that habit or that pattern, because we can always notice there's all these things we haven't done yet. There's always more and more and more we want to do as entrepreneurs. But I find it's made the biggest difference. It can be a bit of a multiplier. I guess the more you notice the wins, the more wins you have to notice. One of our earlier podcast guests, Dr. Priya, she taught at Harvard Business School in psychology. And when I asked her life-changing question, it was very much the point you just made. She said on a Friday night, her kids are there at the dinner table and they're answering that question, what were your wins for the week? What are you celebrating this week? She said, it's not about that moment. It's not about the Friday night. It's about that their brain has to be switched on all week to be noticing the wins and noticing the celebrations. And so that changes their thinking for the whole week. So I really love that point. That's is a really, really wonderful lesson for us. Let's think about additional things in terms of sales then, because we say it's 80% psychology, 20% strategy. Is there anything else important for us to know about the psychology side right now? Or do you have any specific strategic tips that we can jump into to help boost our results this week?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm happy to focus in on both. I think that when we talk 80-20, the Pareto principle applies to so much. So the psychology piece in selling and being able to believe in the outcomes that you want to produce is a very important part. But by the same token, I've also worked with people who have great psychology, but they actually don't have tactics or a strategy. So they're just sort of, throwing things out into the ether and, hoping for a great result because they're focused positively on that. And I think it's important to ascertain what is the right strategy for the right time. And I'm sure you've said this before with your clients that, the right strategy at the wrong time is still the wrong strategy. And so depending on where people's businesses are, depending on the type of product and service they're taking to market, what the buying cycle looks like, what the buyers are discerning as being important to them, I think it's really important to have a framework that you have around your customer journey. Everything from inquiry right through to, how do we onboard a brand new client and what does the induction period look like? How do we serve them so that the sales teams that you have, and particularly this is important as businesses start to scale sales. Like it's fine if you're an entrepreneur doing the sales yourself, you probably have an unconscious rhythm or perhaps maybe even a set of steps you follow. But when you're trying to scale your sales, which is, what sort of gets you past that point of being a micro business to moving into being a more serious SMB, is that you need to be able to scale those sales. And without being able to identify that customer journey, the touch points along the way, then we're potentially stopping ourselves from being able to have the good tactics and the good strategies that work to be able to convert people along that journey.
Yeah, so important. And you said all the way through to induction, but I think this sales journey, probably continues because you want to keep that client retained. You want to make sure they're seeing the value. You want to make sure that they're loving what you do so much that they want to refer other people to you. So I think that becomes important. How do you help your clients map that out from end to end? And do you have like a set structure and process that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely do. And I think it's about being able to create a balance between the logical, tactical processes, but also keeping in mind what is the emotional journey that someone goes on, because people buy emotionally and then they look to justify logically. And so one of the things that we do is we often will get together in, a workshop with the people that are actually doing the sales, people who are engaging in a new sales practice. And we look at, things like their niches. What are some of the demands of the niches? What are some of the emotional impacts that they're experiencing when they come along? What are some of the things that transition and transform as a result of working with them? And one key thing that I can share with all the listeners right now is that you must always begin with the end in mind. So, you talked about the fact that we're constantly re-enrolling our clients. I believe that the sales process happens throughout the journey, even once the contract is signed and the delivery takes place, because we're always building the value and reminding people of the value of the decision that they made when they first joined, the partnership. That being said, when you think about a client that might have been with you for 5 or 6 years, or someone who's had a longevity of a relationship with you that has been a raving fan, what were all of the touch points and what were the emotional shifts? Sometimes they're more important than the than the actual logical shifts. And so I know sometimes people get confused when we talk about emotions. I'm not necessarily talking about, emotional breakthroughs, like a therapy context. It's, if someone comes to you and you're a bookkeeper, then what is the frustration, the confusion, the overwhelm that they're feeling about not being able to manage and have visibility on what's going on in their money, with their money. And then in addition to that, once you've worked with them for a while, they have clarity, they feel secure, they feel informed, they feel like they can make business decisions based on facts and data as opposed to gut feeling, which, I once heard someone say gut feeling is an acronym for gave up thinking. So, that might be an example for a bookkeeper, but whatever your product and service is, I'm pretty sure that if you take the time to think critically, that you will find out that the decision maker that chose to join your business probably had some emotional impacts of the problems that they had when they first came to see you, which then transitioned as a result of the solution you provided.
Love it. And I've never heard that analogy for gut feeling before. Gave up thinking. that works real well. I've listened to quite a few of my clients' sales calls, and people along the way when they're not converting. And what you said is just so on the money, because sometimes when they're not converting is they're afraid to get people emotionally connected to the problem. They're not helping them see what's the cost going to be if they don't actually make this change. What's it going to cost them if they keep doing this for another 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or even the other side of that. What's the benefit? Hey, if we did work together, you did resolve this, what's it going to mean to your life? When we miss those bits and miss getting people like emotionally connected, then there's no juice, there's no reason for them to want to proceed. So if you're having challenges with your sales, I think, this is a great place to look, and not just in that one conversation where they're going to say yes or no, but from the start, from the time they start to inquire right the way through to the fact that they're inducted with you and then continue to work with you.
Yes.
And you said sales is the number one skill, and it's the number one life skill. Tell us, for people listening who maybe feel like they're not in sales and not doing sales, why is sales relevant to them?
Yeah, such a good point. And it's quite funny, actually, because when we talk about sales being the number one life skill, for people who are already comfortable with sales, it just makes total sense to them. Sometimes we work with people who are operationally brilliant or technically brilliant, and they don't consider themselves a salesperson. But the reality is that we are all in sales in some way. So our own internal confidence is the first sale that we make. So if we want to achieve something in our life, whether it be a personal or a professional goal, we have to believe that the actions that we're taking are actually going to lead us to that. And that's that piece we discussed earlier around the itty bitty shitty committee. So if I don't believe my own volition and conviction to achieve something, then how am I going to get the support of other people or move towards that with conviction and confidence? And so then the second part is the sale of influence. And so many people who are not in sales will have children. And I joke and I say that, bedtime is a sales conversation for any parent listening on this call. In addition to that, we sometimes have people who work with us that we need to be convincing around our ideas. We need to motivate our teams to invest in the processes we're asking them to invest in. Even technical people, when they're asking, clients and operational people, when they're asking their clients to do something, they need to be compelling in their reasoning and the way that they communicate that. And that is an influence, which is another sale. Maybe no product or service is transacting or changing hands, but that is an influential sales conversation. And then the third one, obviously, is the transactional, which maybe not everybody listening in this call thinks that they're needing to do transactional sales. But even when you buy something as a buyer, you must be discerning as a buyer and know what are the right questions to ask and how you can get value for what you're purchasing. And so having some knowledge of how to sell will enable you to be a more astute buyer also.
So cool. So important then. So we've got to be able to sell ourselves, then we can sell others. And then of course we can have the sales transaction conversation. And it's so important. So many times I see people who talk themselves out of doing something. They would be perfectly capable of doing the thing, but it's their own internal dialogue, their own itty bitty shitty committee that you mentioned that will stop them. So, well, there's so much power and so much insight on this. I'd love to jump in now and ask you about your life-changing question. We say the quality of the questions we ask ourselves impacts the quality of the life that we lead. With that being true, what's one question you've asked that's had the biggest positive impact on your life or the life of the clients that you serve?
Yes, I I totally agree that the quality of our questions determine the quality of our result. And I hold a belief for myself that no matter the situation, no matter the climate, no matter what's going on, I'll always find a way. And so my question that I ask myself that's life-changing is always about how can I find a way, or who can help me to find a way. And I find that as long as I maintain that focus, that no matter what I'm faced with, good, bad, indifferent, challenging, exciting, I always, by asking that question, manage to find the resources that I need in order to move towards the things that bring me joy and get me closer to my goals.
When you've asked that question, in what ways have it helped you? Have you been in maybe a particularly challenging situation and you've asked that and it's helped you overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's so many, we probably don't have enough time to share them. But I certainly know that there have been confronting situations where there may have been things that were outside of my control or circumstances that unfolded. Some of them involved, deaths, or some of them involved, changes to systems that we were familiar with, or client loads, etc. And so from that perspective, when I ask that question, I find that it keeps me focused on what's next, as opposed to getting caught in what is not able to be changed. And so, much like jumping the worry wall, it enables me to focus on where we're going to next and how we can create a great outcome.
Yeah, I love that. Focus on what you can control. Focus on changing those cells if you can't change the wind. So that's really great, really wonderful. Now, you shared so much value and so much wisdom with us today. If you have anyone listening who wanted to, maybe get in contact with you or read more about, the amazing things that you do, where's the best place for them to come find you?
Yeah, wonderful. So obviously, I'd like to invite everybody to come and have a look at our website, lifepuzzle.com.au. But I actually have a gift for the audience. So if anybody wants to get some more of these mindset ideas or things like that, you can visit 3sales.me/audio, and you can grab a copy of my book, Confident Closing, Sales Secrets That Grew a Business by 400% in just 6 months.
Wow, that's very generous. And wherever you're listening, click into the show notes. There's a clickable link there that will take you straight through to that area. So that's very generous of you. Thank you. Did you have any final messages that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Just remember that whatever circumstances unfold, that if you have the conviction that you really want to create a result, then it's really only your own mindset and your own focus that's getting in the way of you doing that. So, my purpose is to inspire confidence in others so they can make empowered decisions. So how can you empower yourself to have the focus that's going to get you closer to those things that you really want?
I love that. So powerful. And just as a recap from the show, then the focus is the key thing. If you focus on the things that aren't serving you, shift that focus. Focus on the thing that you want. And what is that outcome that you want? And then remind yourself that your first job is to sell yourself. Then you can sell others. And then you can, get the actual transactional sale done. And no matter what's happening in this journey, then on the thing that you're focusing on, ask yourself, how can I find a way? If you have that vision, there is a way. And if you can't find the way, ask yourself that secondary question then is, who can help me find a way? So Chandell, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this call today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Life Changing Questions podcast with your host, Kevin Bees. We'll catch you next time.